Yes, it's actually a very long lesson. And we'll actually see if we do all of the chapter today. We'll see how it goes, or if we do half today and half next week. So it's chapter 26. This is really exciting. It's a new series of chapters. It's a new subject, like a new, I don't know, what do you call, like when you have a book? There's sometimes that like book 1 and book 2 or whatever.
Sequel.
A new topic. I would say, not topic even. It's a new series of chapters. And the first 1 to 25 was like the how-to. First it gave us the anatomy of the soul, chapters 1 through 8. How do we work? We have two souls. What are they made up of? How does it work? Then it became, okay, they struggle with each other. How do we navigate this struggle? And then the Tanya outlined 2 ways that we can get close to God. One way was the long short way, which we meditate and generate emotion. And the other way was the short long way, which is what we can access while we are in this long run process of meditating. And that's a life's work. While we're doing that, we actually have access to natural love to God that we just kind of access and uncover. So we talked about that in chapter 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, and 25. And now the Alter Rebbe is taking us to troubleshooting the human experience. It's like we can, if it was that simple to just apply short way, apply long way, then we would all be, Bainanis, living a perfect outward existence. Just to explain and recap what the Bainani is. The Bainani is somebody who has perfect impulse control. So their inner world, they're still struggling. They're still having desire, urges for things that are not aligned with their purpose or what they want to be or the person they want to become. So they still feel a myriad of everything, yet they have perfect impulse control, and that everything that they do and say is always on par. The work of the Tanya is to get us to that point. Yeah, so where were we? Bainani. Okay, I think I want to just recap a little bit more. Okay, so we have 2 souls. Chapter 1, chapter 2 explains that we have 2 souls. And the 2 souls are in opposite objectives. They have opposite objectives. The first soul, our godly soul, is a piece of God breathed into us. And actually, really, it's the second soul. The soul that's introduced first in the Tanya is actually our natural soul, our animating soul. So according to this, the Tanya, there's 2 souls. The animating soul that's responsible for survival instinct, everything that makes us aligned with animals. Anything that is the same between the animal kingdom and the human kingdom, that is governed by the animal soul, with which animals have as well. So anything that causes us to want to eat and sleep and procreate, survival, anything that's natural really is governed by the animal soul. Humans, the Tanya tells us, have an additional soul called the godly soul, which is enables us to transcend, enables us to access self-control, freedom of choice, reasoning, rationale, altruism. Really, the godly soul is really responsible for altruism. It's what enables us to transcend what's self-serving to what's selfless. And then the Alter Rebbe tells us in chapter 1 through 25 how we can access this selfless experience all the time. Because there's our soul, then there's our emotions, and then there's our actions, our thought, which is an action according to the Tanya, speech, and action, the ways with which we express our souls. So the 2 souls are in conflict. They are each in conflict to which soul is going to dictate the actions of the body. Is it going to be the godly soul that is dictating the action And when somebody is doing something altruistic, their godly soul is dictating their actions at that time. If somebody's doing something not more self-serving, that would be their animal soul dictating the action at that time. The Beinoni is somebody who has complete impulse control of their actions all the time. That's our life's mission. The Tanya is teaching us how to get there and how to access that with two ways. There's meditation, and then there's the uncovering of the natural access to that. Okay, so let's say we've accessed the natural way, or let's say we understand that there's the two ways. We understand that there's a way to access the natural love, which is very deep and very mystical, what we just finished discussing, and then we also understand, and really we're coming back to the long way now, because really the long way has an advantage. The advantage is that it's the product of work. The short way, the natural love, is not to say that it's not work, but it's more adrenaline style based. We talked about how, like, if somebody in history, in the time of the Kazakhs, and they were told, convert or die, and the vast majority of simple Jews that didn't know much Torah said, I'm not going to deny my Judaism. That was based off the natural love, the short way. So it's not work, but it's more based on outward inspiration, stimuli to get it going, even though it's what we have inside. And then the long way, which is what we're coming back to, is, okay, we're going to use our anatomy. We're going to use the fact that we have a cognitive brain, a thinking brain that can reason, to now generate the feelings that we want to feel, to generate the actions that we want to do. And we're going to use that and in a as much as we possibly can, more and more and more and more, until we can get to being a Beinoni, which is, the Beinoni itself is not an end, it's actually a constant work, because they're always working to be that and to do that. And part of the Tanya tells us that actually it's going to come up again in 2 chapters, and we already studied it in chapter 15, is to struggle is to do the work. To do the work is to struggle. So it's a life's mission to constantly be doing this. And because it's a life's mission, and because we're constantly doing this, it's not so simple. You don't just say, okay, mind, control heart, boom, done, got it, right? It doesn't work like that. So that's why we have the rest of the Tanya guiding us through, what if we feel this? What if we feel that? What about that type of struggle? And it actually becomes like a psychology conversation, because it's amazing the way the Alter Rebbe understands our psychology, from the years 1700s. So let's talk about that. Now that was a nice introduction, review. Now let's talk about emotions. So joy, happiness, the emotion we all kind of want, right? Everybody wants to be happy. Why? Why do we want to be happy?
It connects us to others.
Yeah, it connects us to others.
Makes us feel good.
Makes us feel good, right? We all want to be happy. The Tanya tells us that happiness has an advantage, not just because it's enjoyable, but also because it helps us make better choices. And the Tanya gives the example from in the very beginning of, let's say you have wrestlers, or let's say, we all know the advantage of home court when it comes to sports, right? We all know the advantage of the morale in the army, soldiers in the army. We want to boost the morale, right? Because it boosts performance. When you're happy, when you're in a good mood, you perform better. You have access to your more clear brain thinking, and you can actually succeed more easily. So why do we have sadness then? If happiness is the way to go, why does sadness exist? Let's talk about sadness. Because this chapter is about handling negative emotions.
So that you can feel happiness.
Exactly. We have the yin and the yang, right? If we only had happiness, the world is created in a way where there's black and there's white and there's dark and there's light and there's happy and there's sad, and the sad highlights the happy. When you have a meal and you only have sweet foods, it's not even enjoyable. You have to have a little tang, a little heat, a little bit of bitter, and then you can appreciate the sweet. We have the yin and the yang. If the white and the black, and then there's the little black dot, they feed into each other. Night becomes morning, morning becomes night. And as Brene Brown says, if you dull yourself if you numb out pain, if you numb out sadness, you're going to be numbing out all emotion, joy too. So they really do, we really have that sadness as just, it's part of it. It's a package deal. Sorry, keep losing my notes. Okay. So, sorry, I lost my train of thought again.
Does that make you sad?
It makes me nervous.
You were talking about how dulling out an emotion like sadness is also going to dull out happiness.
Yes, thank you. So, does sadness have a purpose is the question. Without the sadness, we won't have the joy. But do we want to lead with sadness or do we want to lead with joy? Joy. And that's what we can read it inside. We've read, okay, so before we read it, the Alter Rebbe loves this statement from King Solomon. It's a quote from King Solomon, that there is an advantage of light over darkness. We've talked about it with the candle. You don't have to fight darkness. You just simply add light, add good, and the darkness will make way. It will go away because the light pushes it away. And the Alter Rebbe is bringing it back here at the bottom of the first page. Such joy is of greater quality. So the Alter Rebbe is using the same sentence with a little bit of a play on words, that there exists an advantage of light over darkness. There also exists an advantage of light that happens because of darkness. So we've all experienced, we've actually studied about it in Tanya, the beauty of a broken, there's nothing more whole than a broken heart. Are you familiar with that famous quote? There is nothing more whole than a broken heart.
There is what, sorry?
There is nothing more whole than a broken heart.
It's like a contradiction in terms.
Right. But what is it about a broken heart that's whole? The Kotzker Rebbe. Yeah. Actually just saw it on Instagram, so it's fresh in my mind. There's nothing more whole. Yeah. So, and he actually said more quotes. I was reading recently that he had more of them. He had there's nothing more straight than a bent ladder. Mm-hmm. There's nothing more, this is sad. There's nothing more black than white shrouds. White shrouds, like burial shrouds. There's nothing more black than white shrouds. So that was his style, the Kotzker Rebbe. But he said there's nothing more whole than a broken heart. What is whole about a broken heart? We've talked about this in one of the earlier chapters. I don't remember which one. That, when you meet somebody who's gone through something, the maturity, and they've gone through the broken hearts, they've gone through those experiences in life that shattered them open, right? And you encounter these people and you see that they're whole, that they have the wisdom, that have the full life experience, understanding. They now have experienced the broken heart. Now they've shattered their hearts open, and they now have this new understanding of joy. They have a new understanding of compassion, right? So the Alter Rebbe is saying that the sadness has a purpose. It gets us to a deeper level of sensing, of feeling, of emotion. It gives us a deeper sense of even connection. It helps us appreciate the joy more. However, as a means to an end, we don't glorify the sadness in itself. We're not going for sadness. We're not saying, okay, sadness, this is how we want to be. Actually, we really want to be joyous. We really want to lead with joy. We really want to connect to God with joy. The sadness can be part of that journey, as long as it's not glorified as an objective. But that introduction to sadness in general, now the Alter Rebbe is going to say, how can we approach sadness? And he divides it into two categories, and then we can decide if we want to do both today or if we want to just hit one of the categories today and one next week. But there's two categories. One of them is physical, material life, and the other one is spiritual problems. So material problems, spiritual problems. So the Alter Rebbe addresses the material problems first. And he divides the material problems into three categories. And I thought about it, and I think it kind of is accurate. There's Bane, Chaye, Mizane. Children, health and well-being, and livelihood.
Can you repeat that, please?
Children, health and well-being, health and wellness as the second one, and the third one would be livelihood, money, finances.
Husband?
Husband is...
With the children.
Well, I say he's with... Do you say he's with the children? Do you say he's with the livelihood? Do you say he's with the health and wellness? I don't know. That's a good question. I would maybe health and wellness connection, right? What that feels like for us. I don't know. That's a good one. That's a good question. Where does husband go?
For some people, yes. For some people, not. For some, definitely with the children.
Wow, I actually love that.
There.
Yeah. You decide. Choose your own adventure. Where does the husband go? So, anyways, it all goes, that's basically most of our problems come from either, my child, or people who want to have children, or people who have children and want guiding them on the right path. And then there's, of course, health and wellness is like number one, right? Our health is the most precious thing that we have. And of course, livelihood. So what happens? Okay, so how do we approach this? Now, it's really important before we read what the Tanya has to say, that to address two one of them is that there's a difference between suffering and pain and sadness. They're not one and the same. Sadness is an emotion. Suffering and pain is a stimulus response. It's a neurological response. So if somebody gets burnt, you cannot meditate yourself out of the pain of the burn, right? The pain is going to happen. What is sadness? Sadness is the thought, the judgment that we attach to the suffering or the pain, the emotion about it. It's really important to separate the two before we talk about this, because we never want to talk about pain and suffering in the same way that we talk about sadness, right? So we never want to say this to ourselves, like, don't hurt or don't feel that. Like, that's not only is it non-compassionate, but it's also not accurate, because we cannot unhurt a hurt. So there's hurting and then there's sadness. Second thing is our pain, our pain, sadness, our experience, and others. We cannot equate the two. So according to our tradition, the way to approach other people's pain and other people's sadness is only with compassion. Either help fix it or have compassion for it. We're never going to be judging somebody else's, what they do with their pain, how they're reacting to it. Are they wallowing? Are they, we're not judging other people. Other people's sadnesses in our lives so that we can exercise compassion for them. This conversation is about how we approach our own suffering, our own, only our own, which means I can now, when I'm reading the chapter and when I'm thinking and teaching it, I'm only thinking about things in my life. So, what is the advice? Well, we have the stories from the Talmud. We'll start with that. Rabbi Akiva has a famous story. He used to say, Gam zu l'tova. And actually, the Alter Rebbe quotes that here. The second page, the second to last paragraph. Ki gam zu l'tova, in quotations. And in the English it says, for it too is for the good. So the Rabbi Akiva, there's a famous story that he was traveling and he had a rooster, a donkey, and his fire. He was camping for the night. He lit a fire. He had a donkey and a rooster with him. And all of a sudden, a wind comes and blows out the fire. And then a wolf comes and pounces on the chicken and the wolf. And basically he has nothing. And after each thing he said, Gam zu l'tova. This is also for the good. Okay, the next morning, he wakes up and he continues to the town. And he finds out that the night before, bandits had come and ravaged the town. And the light that was put out didn't give away where he was. And the rooster didn't, crow, and the donkey didn't neigh. And he was saved because of all the things that were unfortunate, that he could have said, oh no, I don't have a light. Now what am I going to do? And now my only possessions, my rooster and my donkey, now I don't have them even. What does God want from me? Right? He could have done that. But instead he said, also for the good. And sure enough, he found out that it was for the good. We all have had experiences in our life where something has happened to us that has felt so frustrating at the time. A setback, a closed door in our face, a change of plans. And it feels so frustrating. Like, how could this have happened to me? But then it's happened to me, and I think we've probably all experienced some point later in life, we look back at that and we say, oh wow, it's a good thing. I'm a different person today. Or I wouldn't be here because of that. Or I would have gone down a completely different path in life if that had happened to me. So it was painful at the time, but I'm happy that I am where I am. Right? That happens because of what's going on beneath the surface, Kabbalistically. So we've talked about sadness being a yin and a yang, right? You can't have joy without sadness. You can't have good without bad, right? The world exists in duality. Part of the way we have freedom of choice is part of the way we talked about Kabbalistically, the tzimtzum, right? We did that. One can also say, the very judgmental, I don't recommend this way, you can also say, well, it's actually, there's a place for it, in small amounts. This is happening, you can also approach suffering with a very, pragmatic or very analytical place, what's the word? I don't remember the word, but where you say, what went wrong here? You can do an investigation, right? There's a company had something bad happen, something terrible, an accident, a recall, and they do an investigation, and the plane, the Boeing plane, right? That just, or I don't know if it was Boeing, but it just overshot the runway, and that was a terrible accident, right? It's terrible, terrible. At that, those people are, not only are they saying, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry for all the victims, but they're also doing a stock taking. They're also saying what went wrong here. So they can not repeat mistakes, and they can change whatever happened that caused them to be in this position. So there's also suffering for that purpose. Like I said, be careful with that because it can be really toxic if it's not used in the right way. But coming back to what I was about to say before, I'm leading up. There's another way to understand suffering according to the Kabbalah. Very cool. So there's Alma de Iskasia and Alma de Iskalia. There's the revealed world. This is Aramaic terminology from the Zohar, from the Kabbalah. This is the third page now. There's the hidden world, and there is the revealed world. And this is, of course, also understood better if you were at the classes where we talked about the symptom, the contractions of the way God created the world. There's the way the world is manifest, the way God's energy is manifest in the world, which is what we see. But then there's the way that God's energy is not manifest in the world before it's filtered down. And like we've talked about in the Tzimtzum, it's stages. It's done by stages by stages. And just to put in there from other chapters, because to give a deeper understanding, if God would have not filtered his energy, the world wouldn't exist, because it would be like we have the story of the shattering. Wow, this is a lot of, really it's a whole other class, so please just leave it if it's not resonating. But the idea of this is the idea of like a teacher that kind of condenses the breadth of their knowledge so that the student can understand. God did that for our world to exist. If for our world to exist as an independent creation, to feel independent, we don't have all of the energy. We don't experience it. It's still here, but we're not receptive to it. It's hidden. Okay, so there's the hidden and there's the revealed. So how do I say this? We're coming at this with a premise that God is good. Can anything negative or bad come from God? Technically, no, because God is good. But does that mean that we experience everything that happens as good? No. Because of the way it's filtered out here. But if we were to say that it didn't come from God, that would be heresy, because everything comes from God. And God is good. So how does that work? So that's about the filter. The way we answer that is with the filters. I've heard this example that I think would be helpful here. So let's leave this Kabbalistic idea for a minute and talk about children and food. So if you gave your kids a choice, do you want to go out for like high French cuisine, or do you want like pizza and French fries? Pizza and French fries, right? Because a child's tastes are limited, really. They have limited tastes, and once they get older, what did you say?
The children born in the Cayman Islands might be a little different,
right? So I thought about that, and I'm like, no, it doesn't fully translate. But at the same time, even kids born in the Cayman Islands, I teach them at Judah, and they still like candy. They still like food coloring, the whole works. And meanwhile, like as an adult, like I don't even want that. And I remember looking at my older sister and being like, she doesn't like candy? What's wrong with her? What? Now I get it, right? Because children have like immature taste buds. And when you have mature taste buds, you start to appreciate the finer things. So let's use that example to understand we have maybe human beings, immature taste buds, but then there's the finer spiritual things. So I'm really trying to explain this I want to make sure it's understood in a sensitive way, because it's meant to be enlightening and not. So please help guide me, okay? So it's meant to be enlightening and help feel uplifting rather than the other way around. So let's use the actual Tanya words. Okay. Never mind. It's going to be too confusing. No, this is a little bit too confusing, so I'm gonna do my best. Okay, it's very Kabbalistic. So there's the concealed world and the revealed world. So here in this earth, we've got Alma de Iskalia, whatever God actually reveals to us.
Can you say that word again?
Alma de Iskalia.
De
Alma de Iskasia.
Iskalia and Iskasia.
Yes.
What sounds like Spanish?
Italian.
It's Aramaic. It's not Hebrew, it's Aramaic. That's why it sounds like that. Yeah. But they have the same root words as Hebrew. So like lechasot, like that's to cover. And legalot is to reveal. So you're seeing the same, you see that Alma de Escalia, that's the revealed world, and Alma de Escasia, that's the concealed world. So the revealed world for us is what we can appreciate, the pizza as children. That's what we can appreciate. We actually ask for that. We're meant to, we wish that for each other. We wish that for each other. On Rosh Hashanah, we pray for a year full of appreciable good. And part of life is also the things that we don't appreciate, the things that feel like setbacks, the things that feel like suffering. And those things are not appreciable by us because we are spiritual children. We are human beings. We're not angels. We have a body. We're not non-corporeal. How do you say that? So we don't have the tastes for the things we can't appreciate. So we pray for the things that we appreciate. But we all know that part of life is to experience challenge. And those challenges, how do we approach those challenges? We can approach them as bad, or we can approach them as good that we can't appreciate. Energy that isn't appreciable by ourselves. It's coming from the concealed world. So how could Rabbi Akiva say, also this is for the good? Was he thinking, oh, there must be bandits coming to the town and that's why this is happening? No. He was like, whatever it is, it's a challenge. I don't have light now. I don't have the only things that I really had with me. The only things I owned. I don't have that. That's suffering. In other words, he's feeling pain probably. He's not unfeeling the pain. So like we said, we are not going to equate pain with sadness. He's feeling, I don't have light now. But he's saying, it must be good. Because nothing that God does isn't good.
So is it a type of unquestioning trust?
Yes, actually. I wouldn't say
Faith.
unquestioning. I would use the word trust very much. In fact, there's a whole book on trust that it talks about this at length. I wouldn't say unquestioning because as Jewish people, we always question. But I would say acceptance. You can question, but with acceptance, or you can question without acceptance. Right? You can question, but with the underlying acceptance. The acceptance that there's something beyond what I understand now in my present moment that helps approach the challenge with pain, yes, but not sadness. And that brings us to man's search for meaning, right? Mm-hmm. People can experience pain especially when they can understand the meaning and without sadness. For example, like working out, like this hurts good, right? It hurts. You can't really unhurt the hurt, but you can appreciate what it's doing for you, and therefore it doesn't feel sad. It actually kind of feels good. It's like hurt's good.
But are you supposed
Because
to?
you know the result, sorry.
Yeah, I was about to say that.
No, I was going to ask if the goal is to experience the pain with even joy, because that was the word that you used.
That's the ultimate goal. But I say that with humility because there's a story in the Talmud, and it's actually on the second page referenced. And it says, the Gemara explains, right above the one, this too is for the good. The Gemara explains, third paragraph from the bottom, that this does not mean that somebody is supposed to say, actually it's the one before that, in the bold, the well-known saying of our sages, just as one recites a blessing for his good fortune. So in the Talmud, it says that one is supposed to bless God for the bad as much as he's supposed to bless God for the good. Now that feels like reeling, like, whoa. But remember, we're separating suffering and sadness. We're separating pain and sadness. So we're not saying this person who just experienced a challenge isn't having pain. What they're doing is accepting the pain and recognizing that it's more than they can understand and appreciate. It's coming from, it's good. And that's why when actually, like before Rosh Hashanah with my sisters and my mom and whatever, we have a tradition that we bless each other with revealed good. You should have this year only revealed good. Only good that you can appreciate. Understanding that it's all good. But that's not what we ask for. We ask for revealed good. We bless each other with revealed good. When somebody's experiencing challenge, we try to help them with that challenge. Fix it. Change. We want to change the world. It should all be happiness and joy and pleasure and only that for each other. When the challenge that comes is vis-a-vis the joy, when the sadness, which is part of our existence, happens, that's when we are challenged to approach the challenge, yes, pain, but with a humility that this is good, that's more than I can appreciate. And that's the reason why, I'm sorry, just 1 minute, that's the reason why we have all experienced challenge that has led to something greater. That's the mechanism of it, right? You didn't get into that college, but then because of that, you went to the other college, and then you met these friends, and then that led you to this place, and you look back, and I think wisdom and age goes together for one of these reasons. You can look back and say, oh, I at that time thought it was the end of the world. If I would have only known 30 years later. Sometimes we can experience it 6 months later. Sometimes we can experience it in the next day. And sometimes we never experience the why or the wow that was better because of. But it still exists. It's still a principle. So that's the Kabbalistic mechanism that causes this to occur. That anything that is happening is good. Remember the other caveat. We never go to another person's suffering and say, that was good for you.
Mm-mm.
Never, never. This is only for our own.
You wouldn't say to yourself either, in the moment of that suffering.
You wouldn't say to yourself, oh, okay, so this gets me to I didn't finish the Kabbalist, the Talmud story. Okay, so there's, actually, it happened in the Talmud, but a story more fresh in my memory is from Eastern Europe. I forgot the name of the Rebbe, but it was a Rebbe, and he also had like a lot of business dealings. He had like lumber that like he would move things on the river, and all of his assets sunk in the river. He was penniless. He went from being like a wealthy businessman to penniless, and he was teaching students this idea. Oh no, he was teaching students, and they had to break the news to him that he lost everything, and they said to him, so they said, can you remind us of this Talmud idea that you need to bless God for the good and for the bad? And he says, yes, and he explained it to them. And I said, can you explain it again? And he's explained it to them. And then he said, so does that mean that if all of your business assets sunk in the river, you would bless God for the good? And he faints. It's easier said than done. So, yes, it does come from God and it is good, but we also need to be real. Like, we're also humans, right? And we're also meant to be humans, and we're also not going to be able to unhurt the hurt. So he fainted. What did he do next? After he experienced the hurt, was probably more in line with the Talmud. How does he now approach his life? He's penniless now. What does he do next? Does he wallow and say, woe is me? And then, because remember how we started class. What's a more productive frame of mind? A joyous frame of mind or a dejected frame of mind? How are you going to get more done? Right? We all know that, like, which doctor do we want to see? The doctor that is upbeat and right, or the doctor that's dejected? Which person are we going to trust more? Somebody who's, I don't know, the doctor's a bad example, but like, let's say sports team, right? Who's going to do the better? Who's going to perform the better play? right? The good morale or the bad morale. So returning back to that pragmatic joy, which is also aligned with the truth of the matter from a spiritual perspective. So you kind of try to align with that, and then you get yourself going. And we've all done that in our lives with challenge. We've all experienced curveballs. We've all experienced setbacks. We've all experienced suffering and pain and loss. And we have done that. We have aligned ourselves with this attitude. Because we know intuitively that it takes us to where we need to go. Yeah.
I read something very interesting a few days ago, and it said, with every loss, we create a new space available to be filled with a new experience.
Yes.
And otherwise, that clutter, sad, the loss, but by that being removed, it makes an opportunity to
Yes.
experience something.
Yes.
Otherwise, it'd be full.
And what's fresh in my mind is what's happening in California.
Yeah, I'm thinking the same thing.
I couldn't unthink it while I was reading. And it's like, I feel like we all know wildfires create space, but it doesn't take away the suffering and the loss of all those families that have lost everything. And I feel like that's actually a very big, it's an illustration of what's going on. Like, just because it's true that this is nature and how humans have infringed on nature and the whole conversation might be true, it doesn't mean that we approach people in California and say, it's good. Like, it was meant to be, or like, it's nature, or you built there, it's your fault. Like, no, right? That illustrates the difference between how we approach our own suffering and other people's, right? Just because it's factual doesn't mean that it's the only plane, right? There's the plane of the fact of the matter from God's perspective, but then there's the other plane of experience, which is the human experience. And as we need to show up to each other from the plane of the human experience, we can challenge ourselves to appreciate the elevated experience, the concealed world. But that doesn't mean that's the only plane, right? You just drop down, you see it from this altitude, you see it from that altitude, or depth if you're talking about diving. You go from this depth, you go from, and you see a whole different world based on the depth you're at.
For our own spiritual growth, would you think it's already unfolding if through a suffering, through a situation, we would be able to simply say, this is unfolding for my highest good?
That's exactly what this is. That is precisely. Said in one sentence. If you had to make a chapter title, that would be it. Yeah. I think there's more. I would love to show you how this actually appears in God's name, the Kabbalah. Where does the Kabbalah get this idea of the concealed world, the revealed world? So God's name, famous name, has 4 letters. We've talked about it in Tanya before. Yud, then Hey, then Vav, then Hey. The Yud represents wisdom, right? The Hey represents the understanding. The Vav is a long line. That represents our emotions. It also represents the beginning of the revealed world. So the first Yud and the Hey is more cerebral, right? In the wisdom, the understanding. And the Vav and the Hey is more emotional, more felt. The emotion. The Hey, the last Hey is full expression, full communication. So the Yud, and this is a Kabbalah, okay? So the Yud and the Hey, the first Yud and the Hey, is the concealed world. The Vav and the Hey, the second 2 letters of God's name, are the revealed world. There's a lot of Kabbalahs based on these 4 letters. In any case, the yud, which aspect of ourselves does the yud represent? Chachma, wisdom. And that brings us to, I highlighted it here, I wanted to highlight it for everyone, but in this big, thick chapter, shadow of wisdom. How do we find ourselves, how can we challenge ourselves to appreciate the concealed world? Is through our wisdom that we have. The shadow of wisdom. And what is wisdom? Wisdom is curiosity. Wisdom is imagination. Because we have three intellectual, according to the Kabbalah, three intellectual faculties. We have wisdom, the first one. Understanding, knowledge. So understanding is fleshing a whole idea out, getting a whiteboard out and making a whole web of brainstorming, right? Or really, really understanding a subject well. And then the knowledge is application. But the wisdom, that spark, it's a yud. Yud is the tiniest letter. It's by design. The yud represents the spark and the flash of inspiration that you don't even know what it is. You're like, oh, you have this idea, and you're like, well, hold on. Like, I've got an idea here. What is it? And you have got to, concentrate so that you can flesh it out. But that spark of an idea is kind of beyond you. It's that connection to the divine. It's the connection to infinity. That spark of inspiration that you get sometimes. The ability to have that is the power of chachma, the power of wisdom. And the power of wisdom that we have within us is what enables us to connect to and imagine what's beyond our sphere right here. It's to imagine the good that's beyond our understanding. And it's no accident that it's the wisdom that connects to the first two letters of God's name, which is that world of concealment. So it aligns like that. So that's the Kabbalah nuts and bolts of behind what we experience in our life. And of course, it's like, this is a hint of it, right? Sadness happens when we think to ourselves, this is bad. This is going to harm me. This is going to be negative, right? And then when we ruminate on that, we start to feel sad. And then we start to feel slightly depressed or dejected. And then again, those emotions are the opposite of proactive emotions. So it actually starts to hinder our ability to show up for ourselves and others in our mission. So the Tanya is challenging us to approach pain and suffering as it is, pain and suffering, and try not to ascribe the judgment of this is bad that leads you down to sadness. Try to imagine, like you said, this is for my greater good. And then it leads you through it, through the pain. So much of this is like in psychology, it boggles my mind, right? It's right here in the Tanya. And actually, if you could share with me maybe perspective from, especially, a lot of you come from backgrounds that have experience professionally or just in life with this, and you can share maybe an insight. You don't have to. Just saying, I just want to be humble and say, I don't know maybe what you know and how this might be aligning or maybe not aligning. Maybe you have a question, maybe a challenge of how it doesn't align with how things, anyways.
I just
I'm
want
open.
to say that, usually when my kids, when they were small and they were falling or something bad happened to them, I try to always tell them this message, that this happens for a good reason. And I think we do it naturally with our children.
Yeah.
So that it makes them feel better.
Yeah.
When you think something bad happens, but for a good reason, for something maybe that you don't understand yet.
Exactly.
You just feel, okay, I can handle it. I will go through it.
Exactly, and that's literally Man's Search for Meaning, like Viktor Frankl's book. It's about like we can handle a lot when we appreciate the meaning of it.
Yes.
And yes, but we have to also remember that we won't always find out why, right? And that's that humility, but understanding the good that we don't necessarily appreciate.
I think it's mindfulness too. You know, I was just looking back. Katya pointed this out. This paragraph. Because you did not serve God, your Lord, with joy and gladness of heart, from an abundance of everything good. You had abundance of everything. You did not serve God with joy, and then so now you serve your enemies in hunger, thirst, nakedness, and want, and everything.
Wow.
I think this is very powerful. On the back of the page, on the second page, top paragraph.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like the idea of like mindfulness, like of when you're, when you have everything, we're not mindful when we have everything. We're thinking about all the stuff that we don't have, what we're not happy with, not focused on joy and trust in God and appreciation of God and love of God. You're focused on all the things that aren't working or the things that went wrong or the pain and the suffering, and not the joy in all of that, or not what you have. Then that just brings more suffering and pain.
Exactly.
When you're out of mindfulness, you're in your head, you're in somewhere else, it's so much more painful and difficult and challenging, and it has you disconnected from God, and then more misery comes from it.
Exactly, and that's actually part of the chapter, the first part of the chapter. This is where the quote comes from. That's basically making the case for joy.
Yeah.
So there's the chapter's divided in three parts. The case for joy, why it makes sense to, lead with joy. The second part is how we approach physical suffering. And the third part, which I think we'll talk about next week, which is how we approach spiritual sadness. It's a whole different thing. So, yes, it's exactly what the Arizal is saying. The case for joy. It's just it's not pragmatic.
Sure, it's hard. It's when we get sucked into the negativity or to the trauma, and the way out of it is to try to find the good little pieces in that, you're going through a traumatic time, and this is what we say when there's trauma, when there's grief, you're sucked into it, but can we find a couple things that have meaning, that have purpose, that have joy in that keeps you connected to, God, keeps you connected to that it's not the end of the world, that, you're still here, that...
yes, not letting the story become, this is actually terrible and I will not be okay with it.
Yeah.
Right? And I will not be okay. Right?
This is the outside world happening to me. It's not. It's that it's it's happening to me, but I'm still me, and there's still all of this stuff that I still have the godly soul. Like, you forget all of that.
Yes.
And the importance of being mindful of that.
Yes.
This is very.
I think it depends how bad the bad is.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say that you're not going to get through any of this unless you're with somebody. Like, your own faith is not going to do it. You're going to have to have a lot of support.
Oh, yeah.
Most of the time, I believe that you are the only one that can save yourself. Like, people can support you and not guide you, but they can support you and be there for you. But at the end of the day, no matter how many good words or they will try to push you, you are the only one that can lift yourself. You have to do the work.
Mm-hmm. You have to somehow make that decision, right? Mm-hmm. That you...
Well, you
like
have to
say,
go
okay,
along
enough is enough. I've
with
been
the
in my sadness
advice
for
or
too
the
long, and
whatever. But I don't.
I think both are true. I think that
you can't go there yourself.
I don't think that we should discount the fact that we are created to be social people. We're created to lean on each other, to be living in a community, in a village, right? So nobody can do the work for you. In fact, they're not allowed to tell you that's for your good. They're not allowed to, no. They're supposed to create a safe space for you to do your own work. And when you have people in your life that can hold you in your pain, right, that helps you find your own strength, I think.
I would go further. If the people aren't there, you're going to find a solution, which includes suicide.
Yeah, or addiction.
Addiction, escapism. Yeah,
so addiction is actually numbing out pain, right? that's why it was really important that we talk about the first clarification, which is pain does not equal sadness, right? We're not looking to numb pain. We're looking to uplift ourselves through the pain out of sadness. If we numb pain, we numb joy, right? If we numb the... So...
I think, that's my favorite thing that I talk about when I talk about suicide is that, and thinking about purpose and connection to God is like when we feel pain, it's the reminder that we can handle anything, that we can handle it because we were created to be able to handle it. If not, then we wouldn't have these feelings.
And I find that as a parent, like you were mentioning before, I just came up for me as a parent. I find that when my child is really going through something that is challenging for them, I find myself like I have to almost do the same work that I do for myself, but for them, and say, actually, it's okay. They're allowed to suffer. They're allowed to suffer. They're allowed to suffer. And then I find that what happens is exactly what you're saying. What happens is they feel, after they've gone through and I didn't fix it for them, they feel empowered. Mm-hmm. They feel strong. Like, I survived that. I can handle things.
I can handle it. And then looking at, that's the only way you learn it is if you push through. If when you isolate or you have anxiety and you run away or you numb it with drugs or alcohol or food or shopping or sex or whatever, then you never know. It makes it that much harder next time you're faced with pain, which we're all going to be faced with the difficult thing, the challenge, the pain. So you have to feel it and go through it to see like, oh, I can do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's the support we can give each other is when we can, like with my children, like to stay centered and not go down the fear route with them and be like, no, actually you can handle this and support them through that. That's how we can be there for each other.
This morning I was reading before I got here because I have Viktor Frankl Man Search for Meaning on my company cups. And I'm making new cups. And I'm looking for another like Jewish scholar, psychiatrist, psychologist to put a quote on the cups. And so I was researching Judaism and psychology, which really all the founding fathers are Jewish, right? And the only reason why Carl Jung, who is my favorite, one of my favorite psychiatrists, is like considered a father is that Freud gave it to him because they didn't want psychology to be considered Jewish. So he made, he built up Jung so that he could be more of a face, so that people didn't connect psychology with Judaism.
Oh, wow.
And when I was reading, it was talking about like all these concepts are really coming, concepts in psychology, foundational concepts are all coming from the Talmud and the Kabbalah. And I found that, and really the idea in Judaism that we go to our Rebbe, we go to our rabbi for help, where so many other cultures, it's really shunned to share your problems. But in Judaism, we get support from others. We get advice and support from our community, from our Rebbe, from our rabbis, from our Rebbitzins, and how much that is. That's what psychology teaches us, the importance of that. And that maybe it's easier in the Jewish community and for Jewish people. And that's what has led so many Jewish people like myself to be in the field, is because that's a practice of our culture.
So I guess it's not a coincidence that the founding fathers were Jewish, after all.
Who are what founding fathers?
Freud is Jewish.
Those are founding fathers?
Yeah.
Who are they? This is a new concept to me.
Freud would be the most famous one, but then there's some other psychologist, psychiatrist. He's a psychiatrist, but in the 1800s, I was reading about the first person to kind of get their degree in psychiatry was also a Jew. To pursue that, the idea of like being a doctor and then wanting to talk through something with their patients rather than
very Talmudic.
Yeah,
it
to
is
be able
actually
to discuss and question and see,
analyze.
Yes, it's so Jewish to the core.
To talk about pain specifically, that was also I'll send it into the group to talk about pain specifically. That, and they said that Jewish people feel more pain than or talk about their pain maybe more than other people, and that is they're able to talk through pain versus just sit in the pain, and talk through it and kind of move through it versus just suffer. That was
Because
very
also,
interesting.
because in contrast, if you would go more into the Christian, where I did used to go to churches, like growing up, for example, and then I just recalled now, you're indeed not talking so much, you're rather listening, and you're rather being told what you're supposed to do and what you're, how it's supposed to be, rather than, and then, you confessing to some of the things you have done, yes, and being forgiven, for that, but you're not being addressed, like your issues are not being addressed, you're not, it's definitely a different...
Just like repent and it will be
yes,
better
it's more,
versus let's engage in a discussion and see
yes.
how we can figure it out.
Yeah,
what works
we can
best,
problem solve.
How we can problem solve.
Yeah.
Yes, it's definitely a big difference. Beautiful.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Thanks for sharing that.
Pass one of those cups over so I can read.
Oh yeah. If I have any more, I'll be glad to
I
bring
want
them.
one, please.
I was going to say that.
Buy them. They're
actually.
$75.